Despite his reputation right now, Steven Seagal is an action movie legend. He has starred in some of the most famous and badass action movies ever made, and also in some of the worst movies ever made. With over 15 years of Aikido and now a growing experience in combat sports, I decided to break down some of the best and worst action scenes starring Steven Seagal. First of all, I started by examining the first scene in his most legendary movie. So this is the movie which made Steven Seagal break through, and I have to admit, it's a kick-ass movie. Steven Seagal is a legit Aikido high-ranking master, and whatever he's about to demonstrate here, that is very much his Aikido. So this movement is iconic. You see it again throughout this movie, and the great part about that is that not only that it looks so good, which is the reasons why you see it all the time, but it's actually legit effective Aikido technique. One of the few, to be honest. The problem here, though, is that his attacker is not resisting. He just throws a kick and strikes, but there is no follow-up or any defense. And yeah, this movement would be difficult to defend if it's done properly and very quickly, but still, it's unfortunate that Steven Seagal's Aikido, as much as pretty much all Aikido, lacks that moment of resistance, which would make the training so much more effective. So again, the move looks great, and I would even actually dare to say that it could be an effective move. And it seems to me that it's a legit leg lock at the end too, because Seagal is not only twisting the leg, which eventually starts to put pressure on the knee, but is also blocking the other leg by placing his own foot on top of it, preventing further movement. So you're gonna see this movement again a lot. And this Aikido move called Koregeshi, you can actually see it in so many movies. It's so popular between fight choreographers because it just looks so damn good, especially when the person flips around. But the funny thing is that it's actually one of the few effective Aikido techniques which does work in a grappling and fighting situation. I actually personally pull it off very often in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappling. So now what Steven Seagal is demonstrating here in slow motion in Aikido is known as randori, or controlling chaos, where usually 3 or at most 4 attackers attack at the same time, and then the Aikido master needs to blend with them, move in such a way where everyone can attack at the same time, and essentially throw them around without staying on the spot too long. Now the good part about that is that in my experience, it does develop the skill of situating yourself between few attackers and being in a position where it's difficult to attack you at the same time, which has merit to dealing with multiple attackers. The problem though is that the Aikidoka, they attack in predefined ways, which is usually pushing with your hands, which you see right here. There's also grabbing off the shoulders, and occasionally you can get like a straight punch towards the chest, where the Aikidoka just leaves their arm hanging there for you to throw them. But the problem is that there's no forth and back. There's no push and pull. The Aikidoka are just fully running at you, and they're very eager to actually be thrown by you. Now you could consider that Aikido is usually claimed to teach you to defend against untrained attackers, which are supposed to lounge at you, not hold back, and lose their balance, which could happen, but what if it doesn't? What if the person just grabs you and holds onto you for their dear life? They're not pushing you. What if there's a headbutt? There's so many things that are not trained, which is why in the end, this type of training, while it does have some merit, in the end it's lackluster. But it does look pretty damn good.
While I was there,
oh, and that's a cool move you can do as well during randori, where you grab one person and you shove the person to another person, which again, you could use that in a multiple attacker situation. But obviously most people won't be so easily shoved, so you have to consider that as well. It's pretty cool to see Steven Seagal in shape. I have to be honest, now I'm so used to seeing him being much bigger that I kind of forgot how he used to look back in the day. See, I told you you're gonna see this move a lot. Commonly in Aikido, this move is trained against a knife attack. But obviously no one is gonna flip around in the way Steven Seagal's attackers do, because most people will just scream out of pain and fall onto their back awkwardly. And while this would not be my go-to choice for defending against a knife, and I'm not even more sure about a firearm, but the move itself, it does have potential.
Long way from Kansas, Darth.
So now this is an interesting scene, because in Aikido you do train defense against weapons, and that usually includes a staff, knife, or a sword. And so it's no coincidence that you see a sword right here. So again, he's actually going for essentially the same movement that he went before when doing the defense against the firearm. He's stepping out of the way, grabbing the arm, and twisting it around. But this time, instead of making the guy fall, he's kind of using the sword to cut the hand off the other guy. And what Steven is also doing here, he's stepping out of the attack line to the side and entering, which is a very much Aikido strategy known as Rimi Tenkan. Now Seagal grabs a sword, and that's not a coincidence, because again, in Aikido, you're not training only to defend against swords, but you're also learning to wield one. And the way he's wielding the sword here, that's very much how it's taught in Aikido, and based on the way how samurai used to use their swords. And the block he does is also a traditional way of blocking an above attack with a sword, of stepping to the side, raising the sword diagonally above you, so that the other weapon would slide through your weapon, and then usually when you twist around, you're ready to cut back, but in this situation, the guy's attacking Steven Seagal's legs, so he's using that momentum to block. And then we see a technique which could be considered a kokyunage, where Steven Seagal enters and blends with the move so that it ends up being a throw. So now we're seeing the infamous Steven Seagal run. There is an interesting idea that I wanted to add in here. So my first Aikido instructor was a huge Steven Seagal fan. He was actually showing this footage to me back in the day, and he was telling me that the reason Steven Seagal runs like this, that his goal is always to maintain his head at the same level. Kind of like a leopard running after its prey, where the whole body moves but the head stays at one spot. And then my instructor was telling me that the reason the arms are flailing around is because they're completely relaxed, so there would be no tension. I don't know if that's the reason behind the infamous Steven Seagal run, but there you go, now you know probably something new. So it's an interesting moment here because the Asian guy with the black shirt, that's actually one of the real top students of Steven Seagal, Sensei Matsuoka. And it makes sense that he's here. Not only maybe to get some cash for playing the part, but also because Steven Seagal needs top level Aikidoka to be able to perform all the fancy flips when he's throwing them around. So here you see the guy attacking with a traditional Aikido attack known as Yokomuchi, where you're attacking diagonally with your hand in a cutting motion. I have no clue why anyone would attack like that. It's not something people would do, but since it's an Aikido, it makes sense that a guy is attacking him like that in the movie. And then the technique that Steven Seagal does is one which you don't see in many Aikido styles, but again, it's one of those few potentially very effective techniques where you're blocking and you're entering straight to the jaw with your whole weight falling. And probably nobody would flip and roll because of that move, they would just be knocked back. But again, it seems that the people he's throwing around know some Aikido, and that's why they fall like that.
Come to America.
And that is a collection of another set of Aikido movements where first of all, Steven Seagal is grabbing the fingers and manipulating them to drop the person down, which is called yubidori. Again, not many Aikido styles teach that, but from what I know, Steven Seagal used to teach that a lot. And that is again a potentially effective approach. And then right from that, he goes into a traditional Aikido technique known as Sankyo, the third principle, where you're twisting the hand and raising it like a sword blocking the elbow. It's just that he's doing it still while manipulating the fingers, which is again a legit approach. And then using that technique to just throw the person, well, into a glass. Sankyo, the third principle, it is a potentially effective technique. You can pull it off. But the problem is getting to that spot where the hand is twisted around and lifted up and you have it in front of you. When someone is resisting, it's super hard to get there. And that's probably one of the reasons why you never see it in real fights. And there you go. I told you you're going to see this technique a lot. And it's no coincidence that Steven Seagal's top student is performing the fall because he's so good at it. And then again, you see Matsuoka doing another complicated fall backwards because he's the guy who's able to do it. Kind of have to make a point here that this also is a special moment because this may be the very only moment where Steven Seagal is damaged. This is something we're going to look at while breaking down another Steven Seagal clip, but essentially throughout the rest of his career, as far as I know, Steven Seagal would pretty much never take any more damage at all. But I guess since it's the beginning of his career, well, he still allowed it. And then again, it's a legit Aikido technique where you block the elbow by grabbing your own arms. And technically, yeah, you could break an arm of the person here. But as always, the question is, how do you get there? How do you get to the side facing the same way? It can happen. There's one MMA fight where a guy does break the arm in a similar way, but getting there is just not very easy.
Then it was time to take a look at some of the worst.
So now we're going to move almost 40 years into the future and check out a movie called China Salesman. So this movie was made in China, and what many people don't know is that it's a fairly common phenomenon for the Chinese movie industry to hire well-known Hollywood actors to essentially just play cameos in the movie, but then they can market the whole movie as this is the main actor in this film. And apparently the Chinese audience loves it. So this movie features not only Steven Seagal, but also Mike Tyson. So first of all, it's nice to see Mike Tyson doing some fight choreography. And as it was broken down during the show Stunt and React, they made a good point that when you're making a fight choreography, it's best to create a choreography which relies on the actor's already possessed skills. So it's no wonder that Mike Tyson is doing boxing moves and he does a great job. And in the same way, we're going to see how Steven Seagal is going to try to rely on his main skills. So now the moves that Steven Seagal does here so far are not really Aikido. They mostly look like Wing Chun and other Kung Fu styles inspired moves, which seems that Steven Seagal is familiar with. And even that stance is actually familiar to the Wing Chun stance, where a lot of weight is placed on the back foot, while the front foot stays light and the hands are in front. But it can also be some other variation of a Kung Fu style, which I'm just not familiar with. Now that is Aikido. So let's take a closer look at it. So Steven Seagal ducks. So it's a bit unclear how they get to that situation, and that's mostly because of the really aggressive editing of just cutting different shots. But it seems that Mike Tyson's kind of doing like a back fist, and then Steven Seagal blocks that and grabs the hands. And here he could easily do the kotegaeshi move that you've seen already multiple times, but instead of going into a full-on kotegaeshi, Steven Seagal twists the hand down. And that could be either a variation of where you're just trying to control someone by manipulating the wrist, or maybe the idea is that Steven Seagal wasn't able to throw Mike Tyson, and here Mike Tyson kind of uses the momentum of that wrist lock and then goes for a swing. Now then, Steven Seagal kind of uses an Aikido principle of blending with that attack and moving with it, and somehow magically lifting up Mike Tyson up into air and kicking him away. So this move that Steven Seagal does here could also be interpreted as Aikido footwork known as Rimi Tenkan, where you step in and turn to get either next to the opponent or behind them. My issue though here is that when you look closely, I have doubt if that's Steven Seagal. It looks like a stunt double, which is kind of weird already. But to make things worse, what the stunt guys in the Stuntman React show pointed out is that in this fight scene, whenever Steven Seagal gets hit, it's the double. And the reason for that is unlikely that Mike Tyson can't hold back his punches, but one popular theory is that Steven Seagal just did not want to be punched, so they would just get the stunt double there instead of him, and the stunt double would pretend to get hit, which is kind of crazy. This hitting the ear thing, I have never heard of such a technique, so I'm somewhat skeptical about it. I know you can actually do this with the ears, and if you do it to someone else, because of the pressure, actually that can cause a lot of damage and disorient the person. But just straight out hitting the ear, never heard of such a thing. Now again, the editing is so hard to follow here. It's hard to see how exactly Steven Seagal got there, but it seems that he deflected the strike and used that to get behind Mike Tyson. And then he's sort of going for a choke, but that's not how you do a choke. In order to perform a choke, you have to cut the blood flow of both of the arteries to the brain. But in this clip, you see that Mike Tyson has both of these arteries open. And while you could maybe pressure the trachea and maybe use that to choke the person out, I'm not really sure if you have enough energy to press it hard enough from this position. But correct me if I'm wrong. And there we go, the stuntman takes the punch and the fight is over. If you would like me to break down more scenes from Steven Seagal movies, let me know in the comments. If there's enough interest, I'll be happy to do that. And until then, if you want to see how I break down the latest meeting between Steven Seagal and a martial artist and fellow YouTuber Jesse Ankam, click on this video right here. And until I'll see you next time, as always, keep owning your journey.